Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 659, and today's date is May 5th, 2015, and the title of this episode is The Economy is in Freefall, and the U.S. government is preparing for the big event. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand that Greece has been working with Russia, signing deals. They designed the drachma. We understand the government is not going to impose austerity on the people because this would be a huge problem. We also understand that the government has been raiding the pension systems, asking all the municipalities to pass their cash along. We also understand that on Monday, they owe about 780 million euros to the IMF. Now, will they be able to make this payment? We're going to have to wait and see. We'll have to see if they were able to get the cash from everything they were doing to make this payment. But while this is going on, the European Commission is looking at the 2015 growth forecast for Greece and saying, since we're not giving them more debt, we're going to have to slash their growth outlook for Greece. Why? Because it's uncertain what Greece is actually going to do. Now, during the time that the IMF, the ECB, was continually giving them more and more debt, they were out there telling us that Greece is recovering, the economy is getting better, everything is fine. But when we look at this, they were saying back in February that they predicted a decline in their sovereign debt to GDP. They were saying it was going to be around 170.2%. But what really occurred was it increased up to 180.2%. Their predictions are always wrong. There is no growth. You know what there is growth of? Debt. That is it. That is what we are seeing. Now, here in the United States, of course, the U.S. government, the central bankers, corporate media, they're out there trying to cover up what is really going on here in the country. Now, we understand, and we've been looking at this for a very long time, that the economy is slipping into a collapse. They can't stop it. Yes, they can try to prop it up. They can manipulate the numbers, all the statistical numbers, GDP, inflation, unemployment, but they cannot stop what's happening right now. And as more and more information comes out, people are starting to realize, is something going on in the economy? I mean, just think about this. We reported over the weekend that 6,000 stores are going to close down. And this was announced in the beginning of 2015. Thousands of stores were closing down in 2014. The holiday season was a disaster. In Canada, Target closed all their stores, laid off all those people. And we're seeing manufacturing, house sales, completely falling apart. What else are we seeing? Well, March's U.S. trade deficit exploded. Against expectations of $41.7 billion deficit, the U.S. generated $51.4 billion. The worst since when? October 2008. Isn't that when the market came crashing down? I mean, this is the biggest miss on record. And guess what? Prepare for the upcoming first quarter GDP. They're going to downgrade it. It's going to go into the negative territory. And of course, it's going to affect the second quarter GDP that they're predicting is going to be around 0.8%, which is recession level. And if it drops to 0 or negative, we're moving into a depression. The economy is completely in free fall at this time. It is not getting better. New export orders collapsed into contraction. Nothing is going as planned as the United States government central bankers wanted it. They thought they were going to be able to keep this system going. We're in war in the Middle East. We're in war in Ukraine, and they're trying to provoke war in the Pacific because they understand the system is crumbling apart. The Baltic Dry Index, this is the raw material the factories use to produce goods. Well, if the people aren't buying the goods, the factories don't have to produce, and this is quite evident in all the economic indicators we've been reporting on how U.S. manufacturing is down. Of course, the corporate media is looking at it saying, oh, look, it bumped up a little bit, and we're on a rise. The trend is up. No, the trend is not up. The trend is down. The Baltic Dry Index, the raw materials that is being shipped to the factories, it dropped again. 7 points. We're down at 580. We look back to last year, the previous year, we were at 900, 1100, 1500. This system cannot be sustained. It's completely falling apart. And we've been hearing, look at the bond market. This is where things are going to explode. This is where things are going to come completely apart. I had Greg Manarino on the X22 Report Spotlight. He told us to keep an eye on the bond market. Well, Warren Buffett is out there, and he is saying that bonds are overvalued. And a recent survey of fund managers found that 80% of them are convinced that bonds have become badly overvalued. The global bond bubble has ballooned to more than $76 trillion. And interest rates have never been lower in modern history. In fact, 25% of all government bonds in Europe actually have a negative rate of return at this point. There is literally nowhere for the bond market to go except for, guess where? Collapse. As this death spiral accelerates, we're going to see a global interest rate rise, and it's going to be dramatic. And considering the fact that there are more than $400 trillion in derivatives that are directly tied to interest rates, this entire system is going to completely fall apart. I mean, we're looking at a catastrophic failure of the economy. This is what we are seeing. Now, what's very interesting about this, we've been talking about all the economic indicators. We're looking at China, we're looking at the AIIB, we're looking at most of the nations saying, you know something, we will become a member of the AIIB. 57 countries decided to join, not the United States, of course. And we can see that China has been making deals all around the country. I mean, all over the world. Bilateral trades with the yuan and renminbi. We see the IMF is saying, okay, maybe we will be adding the yuan renminbi to the basket of SDRs to make it a reserve currency. Of course, the United States is saying, no, this cannot happen. We understand there's a report out there saying, listen, we need to push the TPP. We need to contain China. We need to force them down and control them. And we need to do this either economically, diplomatically, or if we can't do it in any other way, we need to wage war. And this is a report that I talked about yesterday. But what's even more interesting about that is what's coming out of the U.S. Treasury and what they're planning to do and how they are reporting it, which I find very interesting. Now, you know that we have a huge amount of debt here in the United States. And we know the Treasury is continually paying it down with the revenue that they're bringing in, or they're trying to bring in the revenue to help pay the interest payments on the debt, and it's getting more and more difficult as time goes on. And of course, if something does happen, like a collapse, it's going to be very difficult for the U.S. government to borrow, right? Well, the U.S. Treasury decided that they're going to scrap plans to pay down the debt between April and June, or maybe even longer. It all depends. And they're going to hold more cash on hand. The Obama administration has been studying holding a higher cash buffer for at least 1 year. That's interesting. Why would they be doing this? Well, what they are saying at this time is they're saying that if they hold more cash on hand at the end of every day, it would help protect the government's income stream. They're also warning that Treasury revenues could also be hit by a natural disaster, and this is in small print, or other major events that might disrupt the economy. So what they're saying is they understand that this economy will most likely come down very, very soon. And they're starting to hold cash because they will need this cash to keep the government operating. Because once the full faith of credit of the United States completely falls apart and it collapses, it's going to be very difficult for a government to borrow. Even if they have the Federal Reserve, the devaluation of the dollar is going to make it very, very difficult. Because as you know, once this starts to occur, other countries are going to look at other currencies. And they're going to say, why hold the dollar? And all those Middle Eastern countries and all the countries around it that purchase the oil using the dollar, they're going to say, why hold this? And right now we can see they have given us a signal. They're letting us know that they'll be holding more cash on hand because they're nervous about a natural disaster, which is absolutely ridiculous, or some other event that will affect or disrupt the economy. If the Treasury ever ran out of borrowing authority, it says, it would rely on its cash on hand to pay bills until politicians raised any type of borrowing limit or the system reset. So at this point in time, we can see they've just sent up a red flag. And they're letting us know they're getting prepared. And of course, they'll use excuses that, no, this has nothing to do with that. Everything is fine. The economy's fine. The dollar is fine. But we know from looking at everything is not fine. We see a lot of the wealthy individuals are saying that, this might be a good time to pick up the Chinese currency yuan and renminbi. Even though you're holding on to the dollar, insurance would be good if you held the yuan or renminbi. I also say a great insurance for the collapse of a fiat system is holding gold and silver. Because everyone knows what that is. And it can't really be affected in any way when things start to fall apart. Yes, they can manipulate gold and silver, but it's still gold and silver. It's still weighed. You know what it is. Paper money, they can really manipulate and change whatever they want in a snap of the finger. But we can see the wealthy are even looking at this saying, you know something, maybe I'll take some of my dollar reserves that I have right now and exchange them into yuan and renminbi. Just to be safe. Putin right now out in Russia has signed a law that allows private oil companies to carry out oil exploration and develop fields discovered by them in the Baltic Sea. So he's allowing private oil companies to come in and help with extracting the oil in this region. Again, making deals around the world. Now, I talk about Obamacare quite a bit, and this is definitely a tax on the people. And this is not a benefit for the people whatsoever. And we're starting to see that even the watchdog who monitors this is starting to look at Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, which is the official name, and they're starting to report some things very interesting about what's going on in the health industry. And I talked about this before. In the health industry, since all the insurance companies are in on this, there is no more competition, so they can raise rates. They can give you less benefits because they don't have to worry. There's no competition. They all have to agree and it will be done. That's what the Affordable Care Act did. And what we're starting to see across the United States is that out-of-pocket healthcare costs are going up. And I talked about this before, where the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, the deductibles are so high that even if you have an insurance policy that you're paying $500 a month, you still have to meet your deductible and pay for each one of those office visits out of your pocket until you reach the $3,000, the $5,000, the $7,000, whatever your deductible is, and then it resets the next year. And they're saying that the out-of-pocket medical costs for Americans rose by 11% this past year. And the ability to pay those bills got a lot more difficult, according to a new study by the Watchdog. Costs that are paid out of pocket by patients jumped to an average of $2,491 per person in 2014, up from $2,245 the year before, according to the report. In addition, health insurance deductibles rose at a rate well above that of inflation, while patients were also hit with skyrocketing costs for many popular medical procedures. Deductibles have nearly doubled over the last 5 years. What happened in the last 5 years? We had Obamacare. Do you see the pattern? This is not a benefit for the people. So people now are paying out of pocket their premiums, and they're paying out of pocket for each visit. What is the insurance company giving? Nothing. So they're paying thousands of dollars every single month. We all are, if you have this insurance. And of course, they're going to try to force everyone into it. That's why they have a penalty. This is why they say, oh, this is not Affordable Care Act compliant. You have to go into one of these policies, because these policies are controlled by the insurance companies. And again, we have to remember who profits from this. The insurance companies. There's penalties and taxes intertwined into Obamacare, and it brings in revenue to the government. And what do the people get out of this? Absolutely nothing, except paying a lot of money. Think about it. How much money is someone going to pay if they get it when they're 25 years old? And you go and you spend $300 or $250 a month, and you go to the doctor and you pay out of pocket. Multiply that over the years. How much have you spent, and what benefit have you gotten back? It doesn't really add up. Now, we understand the U.S. government central bankers have been trying to basically block the people here in the United States from seeing certain things. Now, they do bring down YouTube channels. If you're talking about something or a subject they don't want people to hear of, they bring them down. They also basically tell Google or any of the other corporations to say, hey, you know what? In your search results, make sure they don't go to the top. Make sure you don't see them. Alexa, we understand they've dropped the rankings for alternative media. And we're starting to see this quite a bit. I mean, if there are sites that are anti-vaccine or they have alternative medicines, those are usually dropped down. They don't want people to see those type of things. And they kind of censor them by, manipulating the search algorithms. And we see right now that it's not only happening there, but the FCC, since the new net neutrality rules that are coming into effect this June 12th, we see that the Federal Communications Commission member, Ajit Pai, he is saying that the federal government has an impulse to regulate internet content, ostensibly to ensure that the ideas available on the web are balanced. And they might be using the phrase net neutrality to use this for content. Pai said that he could easily see how the net neutrality decision by the Democratic-controlled FEC, which takes effect on June 12th and reclassifies the internet provider as utilities, could drift over to the direction of content, he added. I sense that among a substantial number of Americans and a disturbing number of regulators here in Washington, that online speech is considered a dangerous, brave new world that needs to be regulated. And this is what we are talking about. He is speaking out against this. And when this comes into full effect in June, we might see some changes where they do block certain sites or have them pushed down so you cannot find them. Same thing with YouTube. Because what they need to do is control the wild west of the internet. We see many countries doing this right now. Canada is doing this. France is doing this. Spain is doing this. Australia is doing this. UK is doing this. And now we see the United States. They are also doing this by reclassifying things. And we understand that they're trying to make everyone go back to the corporate media, to the propaganda that they're pushing out. And they don't want the people to hear other sides of the story, because we're coming to the end game here, where things start to really rapidly fall apart. And let me tell you, from coming from the last year of 2014 towards the end of the fall to right now, we have seen things rapidly change. And just by the announcement of the government, the Treasury, saying that we're going to hold cash on hand for a year, tells us something. That something is going to happen. And they're trying to control the entire situation when the entire situation collapses. And this is why they need control of the internet. And this is why they're doing what they're doing at this point. Now, John Kerry made an unannounced visit to Somalia on Tuesday. And this is the first U.S. Secretary of State ever to travel to this country. Somalia has lacked a strong central government for over 20 years and has been battling the scourge of Al-Shabaab, the Al-Qaeda-linked terror group. Of course, this is all backed by CIA, Mossad, UK, and other governments to make it seem like there's terrorist groups all over the place. And in recent months, the U.S. administration has taken note of an increasingly organized Somali government. And of course, John Kerry went down there, and he wants to reestablish relations. The question is, why all of a sudden? What made John Kerry make an unannounced trip to Somalia? Well, we understand a couple things, and we've seen this in many different countries in Africa. Basically, Somalia is across the Gulf of Aden from Yemen. And guess what? They have very fast shipping lanes because they have a huge coast. And basically, they have a massive untapped wealth of oil. Perhaps as much as 110 billion barrels. And why else is he there? Well, China and Somalia have signed a new agreement to strengthen their diplomatic relations, and they did this in April of this year. Part of the agreement, China donated $13 million to the Somali federal government to boost its efforts on rebuilding the country's infrastructure, health, education, economy, and other development programs. China will continue its support toward the development and stabilization of Somalia. And basically, they reestablished diplomatic relations. They opened up their embassy in Mogadishu. Last year, it has been closed for 24 years. So wherever China is, and Russia, the United States will go to that country. Now, they will either create a terror type of event. They will first try diplomatic speaking. They'll try diplomatic relations with the country, and they will try to weasel their way into the country to get control of the oil and have that oil sold using the US dollar. And we see China is already in there. and they're already helping another African nation. And we've seen this all across Africa. This is why the United States is trying to get into Nigeria so bad. Now, out in Afghanistan, we understand, and it was reported that 110 billion of Afghanistan's reconstruction can't be accounted for. They don't know what happened to it. It just disappeared. So what does the Obama administration do? They decided to slash the resources of the watchdog group that reported this. So they reported that 110 billion was completely gone missing. They reported and exposed wasteful spending of billions of tax dollars in Afghanistan. And Obama came out and said, you know what? We're going to cut your funding. The Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, John Sopka, has never shied away from reporting on the myriad mistakes and bad decisions on the part of the State Defense Department in Afghanistan. For his honest and thorough assessment, Sopka may now have to make do with a much smaller staff to keep watch on how U.S. money is being spent. He was told by the State Department that he must remove 40% of his staff from Afghanistan within a year. The reduction will mean the number of SIGAR staff members will fall from 42 to 25. How interesting, because what they're going to be doing in Afghanistan is they're going to be sending more money. There'll be more troops there, and more of it will go missing, and they want the watchdog to have a tough time reporting this. This entire system is completely corrupt. This entire system is being pushed in a certain direction to start war, to steal as much money and resources as they possibly can, and they don't want anyone looking into this. Remember back to 9/11 when the Pentagon lost trillions of dollars the day before the World Trade Center came down? Whatever happened to that investigation? Because as we know, the planes just happened to fly into that part of the Pentagon where they were investigating what was going on. Basically, the government that we have here in the United States is corrupt, not working for the people, and should be removed from their positions. Out in Ukraine, we see the Kiev government has excluded the Crimean port cities from the list of Ukraine's international ports. The document excludes the port cities of Sevastopol, Yevpatoria, Yalta, Feodosia, and Kerch. Now, I don't know if I pronounced those words right, but those are the port cities. And they are no longer listed as Ukraine's international ports. John Kerry right now is telling the European Union that, listen, we must keep the sanctions up on Russia. I know we've had disagreements, but I'm issuing a warning and letting them know that if Europe doesn't keep the sanctions against Russia, there's going to be something to pay. The U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has said there are differences between the EU and the U.S. in their approaches toward Russia. There was some grumbling in some other European countries on the way the sanctions have hurt their economies, and they want them removed. Because as we know, these sanctions are hurting the countries that place the sanctions on Russia a lot more. France, Spain, Italy, Greece, Germany. Those countries are hurting. And what's very interesting about all of this is that the United States government central bankers are telling the European countries, you must place the sanctions on Russia. But what's very interesting here is that the United States government sanctions, who continually threatens Russia and war with Russia, still imports a significant amount of petroleum from the country of Russia. How much petroleum does the United States import from Russia? It's about 389,000 barrels per day. I mean, what we're looking at here is that the sanctions, I guess, don't apply to United States government central bankers because they haven't stopped importing oil whatsoever. And all the other countries can't send over their agricultural products to Russia. They're losing business. And this is why the European countries are getting angry. Their economies are suffering. Businesses are going out of business. But the United States government central bankers don't care. The European nations understand we can't have war with Russia. This will be fought on our front lawns. But in today's world, when we move into World War III, it will be fought on everyone's front lawns because there are weapons today that can reach every single country. Yes, even the United States. World War II, not so much. Today, absolutely no problem for missiles to hit cities here in the United States. Now, Russia is out there and they're saying, listen, if the sanctions are dropped, we are ready, we are willing to work with each one of the European countries. We will instantly resume business. We will start purchasing your agricultural products, and we'll do even more business with you. Now, the European Union is hearing this, and they're saying, you know something, this might not be a bad idea. And we can see that Russia right now is already looking at Greece, Hungary, and Cyprus. They're making economic deals with them. They're saying, let me look at your food. Let's inspect it. We might be dropping the food embargo. And the other countries would like the same thing to happen. Now, China is very worried about the new agreement between the United States and Japan, which was signed on April 27th. This is the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security. We understand that this new treaty means that the possibility of U.S. military intervention has increased significantly in the event of war between China and Japan. Obama is seeking congressional support to sign agreements with the allies in the Asia-Pacific region in the context of the promotion of the TPP. And basically everything that we talked about yesterday about this report, about containing China, this is exactly what's going on. Of course, Abe right now, because of this treaty, is going to his government and trying to rewrite Article 9. And once this is done, they will have China contained at this point. Now we see China, they brought 2 warships from the People's Republic of China. They were seen passing through the Bosphorus, entering the Black Sea. And as soon as this happened, NATO was out there saying, whoa, hey, since we see Chinese ships inside the Black Sea, and you have to remember, China is not a state that is bordered on the Black Sea, so they have 21 days under the Montreux Convention. They will have to leave the Black Sea in 21 days. But NATO, their response, said that, okay, we're going to move a lot of our joint forces from Italy to Romania, which has a historic Black Sea port. This deployment will be the first time a NATO Joint Force Command headquarters has deployed to Romania. Just because Chinese warships went into the Black Sea. We can see right now the United States government, central bankers, NATO, they are preparing, getting ready, maneuvering, and placing military assets where they will need them. Setting up the missile shields, encircling China, bringing in troops and military assets into the Middle East, bringing in troops and military assets into Africa. All of this is being done because we understand the system is coming down. Now we understand last year in Gaza, Israel went all out under the Operation Protective Edge. And basically they were killing civilians. They were destroying the infrastructure. And a report was released by the Israeli human rights NGO Breaking the Silence. And it was made up of active and reserve duty soldiers. The group's mission is to shed light on the IDF's war practices. The report paints an alarming picture of how the Israeli military was very lenient and permissive. Rules of engagement led to the senseless death of unarmed civilians and much of the carnage in the Gaza Strip during the 50-day operation. According to the report authors, testimonies were collected from over 60 anonymous enlisted men and officers, and basically their rank went all the way up to major. The report found there was no clear operational justification to much of the destruction, and soldiers said the most of it was simply to demonstrate presence in the area and not necessarily to target imminent threats, which we reported on during that time that, yeah, this was just destroy the infrastructure, kill whoever you can kill, and there was no rhyme or reason except to control that area. The idea was if you spot something, shoot, a first sergeant deployed at the northern Gaza Strip reported. They told us there aren't supposed to be any civilians there. If you spot someone, shoot. So we can see all governments do the same exact thing. They tell their people to do something. They give them false information to have them carry out orders. We're seeing it here in the United States. We see it out in Ukraine. We see it in the Middle East. We see it in Yemen with Saudi Arabia. And I'm not blaming the people of any of these countries. Just like we can't blame the people here in the United States. Governments who take the power, who push an agenda, will do whatever they possibly can to keep their authority. And they will use the people and use them to whatever they need them to do. And we've seen this time and time again. We see the Yemen rebels, the Houthis. They've attacked a Saudi Arabian city. Now, you have to remember, Saudi Arabia, and a lot of eyewitnesses have seen this, troops have been moving into Yemen. Of course, it's for reconnaissance. But what they're really doing is they're getting ready for a ground invasion. When the Houthis are along the border of Yemen, we see Saudi Arabia, where they have a massive amount of troops, fire upon them. And of course, the Yemen people are going to retaliate. But of course, what's happening here is the Saudi forces, the Saudi government, the U.S. government, they're going to use this and turn it around and say, they're attacking us. This is why we need to go into Yemen. Now, it looks like Syria, the central bankers, are going to make a deal with Iran for another $1 billion line of credit to help out with the war and with everything that's going on there. We have to remember Iran and Syria have a very close relationship. They have a treaty. If Syria is actually attacked, Iran will come to the assistance of Syria. So will Russia and China. And right now they're getting an influx of about $1 billion. Now, I wanted to talk about what happened in Garland, Texas. Now, let's say we believe the official story that the Islamic State is in the U.S. and they are responsible for the shooting in Texas. That we believe all the propaganda about what happened and what the corporate media is telling us and the government is telling us. What does this mean? It means that DHS, TSA, FBI, NSA, CIA, with all their surveillance to protect the everyday American, it does not work. The billions of dollars spent on the NSA data centers, the DHS fusion centers, FBI Stingray devices, and all the surveillance of your emails and everything else, the TSA pat-downs and scans at the airport, it just doesn't work. They couldn't stop this. This is if we believe the official story. It was a waste of money because, as we know and what we've been reporting on, all of this was to spy on the American people, not to look out for terrorists. I mean, all your rights being removed from the Patriot Act, from them taking away your freedom of speech by putting you into cages, by violating your Fourth Amendment, by removing your weapons. All of this was done not to stop terrorism. It was done to limit your rights. Because out of everything they've been doing and all the money they've spent, there was absolutely no warning whatsoever. There was nothing on the DHS alert system. There was nothing that the NSA picked up on. There was absolutely nothing. Where was the chatter? Where was the information? So basically, the terrorism is created from the U.S. government, central bankers, CIA, Mossad, UK, and they use the terror to convince the people, to keep them in fear, and have them do things people normally wouldn't do, like give up their rights. And this is exactly what we've been seeing. I mean, think about this. They're trying to tell us that the Islamic State is now here in the United States. But they had no knowledge of it whatsoever. So, what happened here? Well, the gunmen that we've seen, they came out of nowhere and they started shooting at the Mohammed Art Exhibit and Cartoon Contest. And they basically shot a security officer, and then they were shot down by Special Ops paramilitary SWAT. And this unit was hired by the city of Garland to provide security for the event. How interesting. It's now been revealed that the gunman, Elton Simpson, was being handled by the FBI informant, and court papers in Arizona named the FBI undercover informant as Mr. Daba Deng, a Kenyan, and who from 2007 was paid $132,000 by the FBI to become friends with Mr. Simpson, and who appears to have groomed Simpson through local mosque and helped develop Simpson's ideas about jihad. Deng also helped to catch Islamic covert Simpson on tape saying he wanted to travel to Somalia to join the terror organization. So what is going on here? We have a patsy once again. The authorities in Texas also identified the second gunman as Nadir Hamid Sufi. So basically both of these people, who are patsies of the FBI, who set them up, who had a handler, tweeted on Twitter that they launched a terror attack, that they're going to launch a terror attack on the event. And then ISIS tweeters then joined in to cheer them on, saying they were part of the organization. Now, all this information came out of SITE, which is from Rita Katz, which is linked to Israel and Mossad, linked to CIA. And then we had Pamela Geller, who organized this event in Texas. And it appears from early reports that the suspects were not currently involved with any local mosque whatsoever. And why was this? Because American Muslims reject radicalism that gets blown out of proportion. They don't basically approve of terror whatsoever. And if these people came into a local mosque, they wouldn't be accepted. And we see that the reason why they go to the internet, to social media, to propagandize, they won't gain traction in the American mosque, and it's used to put out into the put out to the public to make everyone convinced that Muslims are all like this, which they are not. And of course, Pamela Geller is out there saying, the attackers represent a large number of American Muslims, which they don't. It's because she was part of the operation. She created this event, put it together, hired the SWAT team to protect it, and then staged the false flag event. After the attack, she didn't call for a dialogue, for peace, we should all get along. Instead, what did she do? She went on to Fox News and called it war. And that appears to be what she wants. She is there to provoke reactions that polarize America, set people at odds, and alienate Muslims. They want people to take sides at this point. Now, the Islamic State is out there and they're saying, this was our first attack. And what is coming is worse, and it's going to be more bitter. And you'll see from the soldiers of the Islamic State what will come. And this is all part of the main agenda. They're building up to the main event. Now, we started way back saying, they have lone wolf groups running around the country. The Islamic State is coming in. And we understand that this event that's going to occur, they're going to use it to cover up this economic collapse. They're going to use the Islamic State as the physical attack. They will then use Russia and China as the cyber attack on the financial infrastructure, on the electrical infrastructure, gas, water infrastructure. Because as soon as the U.S. is vulnerable because of the attacks in multiple cities at once, they're going to say Russia and China saw the opportunity to attack the United States using their cyber teams. And this is why the economy is coming down. And we can see that this is building up. We're getting closer. And this is why we see all of this occurring at this time. Listen, everyone. Thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.